Good afternoon. We're here at Village Hall talking today with Sherlynn Reid, former director of the Community Relations Department for the Village of Oak Park. Sherlynn, I'd like to thank you for joining us to talk today.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Sherlynn, prior to your employment with the Village of Oak Park, you were heavily involved in community-related issues and involved on several boards and committees.
Right, yeah.
Can you talk a bit about what that was?
Well, I was very heavily involved in By School, which is where my children went to school. My two youngest children at that time were in school, and I was involved with the Presbyterian Nursery School, where my youngest daughter was in nursery school. And then I got involved in the League of Women Voters and ran a workshop, a human relations workshop, for 8 weeks with credit through the League to get people acclimated to what race relations and human relations was about. And then after that was elected president of the Oak Park River Forest League of Women Voters and served there for 2 years.
What was the role of the Community Relations Commission following the passage of the Fair Housing Ordinance?
Basically what they tried to ensure was that people had the right to see housing in the community, all over the community, especially African Americans, to make sure that they saw all the housing. And it was just a commission, 15 people serving, with the village attorney being the one who would take a case if there was such a case. After the ordinance was passed, then they hired a secretary who was Virginia Casson, and a man by the name of John Dwyer who acted as kind of a representative. And that went on from 68 to 71. And they basically were talking to realtors and bankers and insurance people and citizens about the fair housing law, what it meant, and how it was going to be enforced, and enforce it where people complained that they felt that their rights were being denied, or they weren't able to see property in the community, or weren't able to have access to the information about property in the community. That would go to the commission. But you would have to take it to the commission at their meeting, or John Dwyer or Virginia would take the complaint. The village manager, then Lee Ellis, the village manager, felt that that was a little cumbersome now that we had a law. First of all, the village attorney had other things to do, and secondly, that he felt it was very important, and the trustees passing a fair housing ordinance meant that it was important. And so he felt it was important enough to put a department together and to have it a part of village staff, so that all the departments would know the importance of the fair housing law and the importance of human relations. And at that time, that's what it was called, human relations. And so he asked the trustees if he could establish a community relations department, which would entail the Human Rights Act, as well as anything having to do with things working well in the community on a human basis. And so in 71, the Community Relations Department was established, and the ordinance was changed to say Community Relations Fair Housing Law.
What were your duties as a community relations representative for the Village of Oak Park?
Basically, what my role was as a community rep was to meet people in the community, to encourage people to come together, to talk about what their concerns were as far as the fair housing law was concerned, as far as human and community relations were concerned. People kind of felt that the fair housing law meant if there was a black person that wanted to buy your house, regardless of what they wanted to pay for it, you had to sell it to them. That wasn't what the law. There were some people who thought the law only applied to blacks, and if whites could go ahead and be discriminated against, and that was okay. So it was a matter of informing people and letting people know what the law was about, and having a black person to talk to them about it was also, you know, an advantage, or at least a part that I thought would be advantageous to the community if we did that. We established block clubs and encouraged people to have block parties, met with realtors and talked to realtors about showing homes in the community to people of different colors, because realtors had a pattern of showing homes to blacks in one section of town and whites in another section in other communities. And so we did not want that to happen here.
What did the Community Relations Commission do to really affect or change the practices of the real estate industry at that time?
The commission basically would be the eyes and ears in the community that would bring community concerns to the staff, and then we would work together to resolve a complaint, a concern, or improve a situation that might not be. One of the other things was that it was important to change a pattern that had happened in other communities in which when black people moved in, services were let down and responses were not as immediate. And so one of the messages we wanted to get across, and with the agreement of the trustees and the village manager, is that in places, buildings as well as areas where black people were living, were going to get the same services, if not better services, than other parts of the community. That was not going to be, you were never going to be able to tell, as you could in other communities, you were never going to be able to tell where a black person lived, because everything would look the same and look good throughout the community. And that had to be an education to get it across to the lending institutions, to be sure to make loans to people, conventional loans to blacks, as well as FHA loans, and not just FHA loans, because when we moved here, they tried to encourage us to take an FHA loan. And while there is nothing wrong with FHA loans, if the whole community housing sales are made through FHA loans, that means the community is not going to have much invested in it. Therefore, it's going to deteriorate. And the people who live there end up getting blamed for the deterioration when it's really the finances were not put in it. So you need to have a substantial number of people buying homes through a conventional loan, which at that time was putting 20% down, and that's an investment in the community. And so we're educating people about those kinds of things, about FHA, about insurance, about real estate choices, trying to ensure that everybody saw everything in the community and made their choice based on that, rather than making it based on where they thought somebody else lived by race.
Aside from the educational component that you've talked about that was so critical for residents as well as real estate developers to understand, what major actions do you recall that the village took to ensure the Fair Housing Ordinance would be in effect?
Certainly the amendment to the Fair Housing Law having to do with for sale signs, in which the village, with the recommendation by the commission, from the commission, that there be a ban on for sale signs, because what tended to happen, and what still happens as a matter of fact today, is in a community that is predominantly white, you see no for sale signs. When blacks start to move in, all of a sudden for sale signs go up, and they go up in abundance. And so it's kind of a message, this community is going through racial change. And we did not want to give that kind of message, so we encouraged the commission to encourage the Board of Trustees to pass a ban on for sale signs. And they did. As a matter of fact, in 1977, the Supreme Court came down with a decision having to do with a case in Willingsboro, New Jersey, that the ban on for sale signs was unconstitutional. And our Board of Realtors said here, as long as it was on our books, the village's ordinance was on the books, that they would continue the ban. And it's interesting because in '73, when it was passed, the Board of Realtors did not like it. They thought it was awful to have the ban. But what they found was that they were able to sell houses the same rate, if not a better rate, without the signs, and they did not have outside realtors coming into the community and trying to sell houses, because you couldn't have a sign, so therefore people didn't know who you were, and members of the Oak Park River Forest Board knew what houses. You could come in their office and look at all the listings and not just look at a house that had a sign on it. So they found by '77 that it was beneficial to them not to have the signs, and even today we don't have signs.
In 1976, Oak Park was named an All-American City. What impact did that notoriety have on fair housing?
I think it had a positive impact because of the three reasons why we were named All-American City, and it was the downtown Oak Park, the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio, whole tour thing, and the housing center. And I think that what that said to the nation really was, here is a community that has willingly gone into being racially diverse, talks about its integration, and it's willing to have people of different races and different backgrounds in the community, and it's thriving. And it's I don't like the term success, because I don't think we succeed until everybody is racially diverse, but that it's still a desirable community to live in, and probably more desirable now in 76 than it was in 68 when they passed the law. So I think that being an all-American city had a positive impact on the community, both internally as well as externally.
It's been 34 years. Do you have any insights or observations that you'd like to share with viewers?
Well, I'm pleased in one way, because there has certainly, for Oak Park, there have been, you know, a lot of changes and a lot of improvements. But I'm a little disappointed that the rest of the country is still going through the identification of communities by race, and that people still don't fully, either white or black, have the full choice of housing that they should have, and that we still operate under a dual housing market rather than a unitary housing market. And so I hope in the next 34 years that houses will be sold, communities will be made up of people of all different backgrounds, and that won't be an issue as to what race you are, as to where you live.
Thank you so much for being